Welcome to NADA 2022 Day 2. And I'm sitting here with Mr. Paul Daly with ASOTU, Automotive State of the Union. I'm super excited to be here. And we're going to be talking about some empathy. We're going to be talking about being a dealer partner / vendor. And I know a little bit about it because I grew up in the car business. But I want to first have you introduce yourself.
Paul J. Daly. I've been in the industry for 20 years. I have a really burning desire to see vendors and dealers work together better because I believe that the speed of innovation is significantly impeded when vendors and dealers aren't doing what they need to do to work together in a true partnership fashion. So that's what's driving me. That's what's driving Automotive State of the Union to speed innovation through true partnership.
Yeah. So as I was growing up in the car business, right, not in the software side, but in the car business, I was always finding these efficiencies. I wish something worked like this. Or when I was merchandising vehicles, I was like, why don't these two communicate? And I'd be getting almost upset with my vendor because I'd call them and be like, yeah, you guys should do this, right? And then sometimes they're like, okay, cool, we'll put it on our list. And then I wouldn't hear anything. And so then there was this kind of animosity, mainly because it almost felt, I might be reaching here, but it's almost like my parents talking to my generation, like, why don't they get me?
I wish they would. I think that is like one of the indicative moments. The dealer, it's like the front of the house, back of the house divide if you have restaurants. I grew up working in hospitality, and there was always the front of the house, which is, you know, the hosts and the hostesses and the servers and the expediters, front of the house. And then in the back of the house, the kitchen, you have the cooks and the prep cooks and all that. And there was this line between them, which is the service lines, where they push the food under the window. And in the unhealthy situations, it was this side against this side, when really, they really needed each other, but they never acknowledged that they needed each other. They were like, I had to work with the other side. But in the best relationships and the best restaurants I worked in, they saw themselves as counterpoints to the same end. And the consumers won. They all had a better experience working. And so, you know, there are common phrases that I've heard, and I know that you've heard them because we were just talking, and I didn't even know that you still live straddling the dealer world and the tech world. Yes. So you're an active dealer, you're in every day. You're like, I go in every single day. And so that blew my mind because it's a very rare thing, right? You usually see someone will leave one side and go to the other side. But here are things that I hear all the time, and you'll probably laugh, and you can probably add a lot of commentary to this. So the dealers are saying, they don't understand. They've never served a customer, right? Right? They need to understand. Fill in the blank. I think that that's a real toxic statement because that's where the disconnect happens. They need to understand. They've never served a customer. The techs on the other side are like, they need to understand they've never dealt with a developer, right? Those are two different things, very different things. They don't understand. They don't understand how disruptive an install is. The vendors are saying they don't understand how to follow install procedure, right? And then so everybody's like at this combative relationship when really the thing that's going to solve this, the thing that's going to help the front of the house, back of the house is really empathy, right? It's become a buzzword. And that's where partnership comes in because that's why in the restaurant business, in the good restaurants, they would make the servers work a week in the kitchen. And sometimes, not always, a little bit rare of occasion, you take some of the chefs and the cooks to come out and man the host station, right, and see what it is to actually. Oh, this is what you're actually dealing with, right? And so I'd be interested in your perspective on all of that because you still live in both worlds.
Yeah. So you took me back there for a second because I remember my dad in the early days. My dad started the company, Country Hill Motors, our car business. And I remember when we were iterating, getting into websites and getting into digital space, which I loved because it's where technology lived in the car business, was in marketing. But I remember him at some point almost dismissing it and saying, just build a website, just like make it happen. Just build a website. And it was so dismissive, it was witch's brew or something, and it was so easy for me to just go ahead and build a website. But how far we've come from those days as a dealer body of saying, just go build a website, to today understanding that there's nuances and there's things about each element of that, similar to building a home, you have experts that are plumbing and electricity and roofing and all these different experts in digital retailing and experts in service and experts in limiting friction from the sales process. And there's, I think, how far we've come in the amount of respect that the dealer body has now come to appreciate and, quite frankly, is curious and hungry for, in now saying, okay, we get it. Now we want an expert experience for our clients because we see we're being disrupted, right? So I think if we remain curious and if we remain respectful in that way, and what you said about taking somebody from the front of the house to the back of the house, if you look around here in black shirts and in blue shirts, that is our dev team, that is our performance team, that is our onboarding team, and our sales team. We brought them all here together because we want our developers to understand the product we're building and who's using it and the problems that they're facing. And when we are onboarding a client, that urgency to get to market is the same as the urgency when we buy a car, and we measure days to market to get it online, and we measure days to sell it, and we measure the amount of time that it takes in order to recon a car and then buy another car. All those things are innovations that matter in order for us to continue growing.
It reminds me of a story, kind of thinking about like what is a partnership and what is a consumer. Like when am I dealing with a customer and treating you like a customer or viewing you like a customer, and then when am I viewing you like a partner? So when my family took our first trip to Disney, just about, I don't know, it was probably 2 years ago. It was right before the pandemic hit. And we had never been there before. I'd never been there. My wife, maybe my wife was when she was a kid, but we brought our 3 kids at the time, and we go to Disney. High hopes, right? We've have a lifetime of hype, a lifetime. And I'm like, from my business mind, is like, I'm going to pay attention to this business model. I can't wait to see how like no one's changing the trash because it's all underground and hidden Mickeys and great process. And so we start off by going to Denny's for breakfast because we had just gotten in, and we stopped at a Denny's, and there was somebody in Denny's, and he was making balloons from table to table. This was just at Denny's outside the park. We're like, oh, okay, this kind of vibe in the area is entertainment and fun. And he said, listen, I work at Disney too. Let me give you some secrets. And he said, there's a little booth when you walk in to the left. It's like a little hut. Go in that as soon as you walk through the gate. Go in the booth, and they have buttons. And one says, it's my first time, like first time here. He was like, get that button, wear it. Everyone will make such a big deal that it's your first time. So my wife is like, this is going to be awesome, right? So we're like looking for the booth. We walk in the door. We go to the booth, get the buttons on. We're all like, it's about to be on. Like, not only are we getting Disney, but we're getting, it's my first time at Disney. We're walking around, and the first character we see strolling, right? There's people dancing as people come in the park in the morning. We're kind of like, all right, we're taking it all in. And we see Mary Poppins. And Mary Poppins is strolling. You know, like Mary Poppins, she's got her umbrella, and she's got her head up a little bit, very proper. She's strolling, and we're like, kids, it's Mary Poppins. Like, let's go get our picture taken. And my wife's like, oh, can we take a picture? And she's like, I'm sorry, we don't take pictures, but you can stroll with me. And my wife was like, we can't take a picture of Mary Poppins, right? So she was like, And then so we're walking through the park, and you know we're getting the sights in, but no one made a big deal about the button ever. Right? And then there are a couple little, you know, your expectations are so high, and there are a couple little things that we're like, well, let's get some lunch. So we go to have some lunch, and there's a point in this, and we're like, let's have some lunch. And then we're like, oh, if you don't book a seat to get lunch, you're waiting a really long time. So now we're waiting like 2 hours for lunch, right? And still no one's mentioned the button. We get to the end of lunch, and my wife goes, you know, and she takes the button off, and she smushes it in her mashed potatoes before the server comes out. She's like, it was one of my fondest memories. She just smushes it in there. She's like, that's a bunch of crap, right? No one said anything. My perspective and her perspective going in that, we weren't trying to be a partner with Disney, right? Full on consumer mode. What can Disney do for us, right? And that's our expectation as a consumer. If one side, right, there's no partnership there, right? You're serving me, I'm the customer. That is not going to work in this industry, right? And I've sold to dealers for 20 years, from reconditioning back of the house, right? Fixed ops, let's make the car look better, because my first company was a reconditioning company, and now I have an agency, and now we're doing Automotive State of the Union and Contagious. And we've all had that experience where you're talking with the manager or whoever you're trying to convince, and they're not even making eye contact with you, right? They're doing something, and you're talking from this direction, and they have a I'm the customer, you prove it to me mentality. Now, the retail side of me says, yeah, like it is my job as the vendor to woo you, to wow you. But I think that that perspective and that attitude isn't going to be what creates partnership, right? That's consumer behavior. We need partnership behavior, or else, like we're the topic of the talk, and the speed of innovation. Because who is losing in that situation is the dealer, is the vendor. Not only that, but the synergy and the innovation that happens when they start working together. So I'd be curious to know, as you're selling to dealers as a dealer, how do you overcome that, or do you find that the dealers that you're selling to are just partnership minded from the beginning?
So this is something we learned early on. When I used to be sold to, like if a vendor had called me, the mistakes I learned that they made right away is when they essentially demoed me the product and waited for me to have the aha moment of how it would fit into my organization, what problems I was solving, and so forth. And I realized money only exchanges hands when problems are solved, and just solve problems and you don't have to sell. So we built VinCue to solve problems in the automotive life cycle, from acquisition, appraisal acquisition, to sale. And those friction points are what we want to be better at every single day so that we can get those cars online faster, increase gross and churn. So when we started demoing, if I just gave somebody a tour of our system, that means they would have to contrast it to what they're currently doing, and we're essentially just showing them and waiting for them to tell us that we're worth something, right? We shifted that completely and started talking at the problems. Therefore, we had to be the experts. We had to understand and empathize with the problems that sales managers were facing, that salespeople were facing. For example, I don't like, pardon me for being blunt here, I don't like keeping people stupid, okay? Right. Salespeople, for a long time, have been kept stupid by managers, not everywhere, but in certain stores where any question that they need answered, they have to go to the desk. What recon was done to this car? My customer's asking, why do I have to go to the desk to figure that out, right? Well, that's a technology opportunity. So we built a system within VinCue to give salespeople the ammunition to know all the market data, to know all the reconditioning, all the merchandising data, everything that they need to know on any piece of inventory so that they can be experts, so that they can grow. Same thing happens on the vehicle acquisition side when we empower vehicle buying agents within a car dealership to use the power of the appraisal tool to understand how to put a number on a car. You don't need to spend 20 years in the car business to know how to appraise a car if you are given the right information and the right leadership. Those are the types of things that we speak to now. It's the solution. How do you get to buy 100 cars a month from the public, increase gross by $2 million a year? That's what we're solving. You want to know how? We'll teach you, and we'll do it together. And it's you're absolutely right. I've always, as a dealer, never liked the word template because it makes me feel like I'm not special, right? Like, yeah, sure, we'll give you a template and it's going to be great. You can pick from 30 templates, right? So it's really important to us that when we're building a solution, whether that's iterating on a process, whether that, and you know this because you guys help dealers get out of that mindset, or quite frankly, the PTSD that they maybe have felt with other dealer partners or other things, initiatives that they've had, in order to get into a space where they can do what's right for their store, their market, their customers. We made a goal at the beginning of this year within VinCue of, we said, what do we want to accomplish this year? And we want it to be simple. And so we decided that happiness was our goal. So we said, okay, I mean, that's lofty. What does it mean? In broad, right? In broad. And then we figured out, as we were iterating, that happiness means that we have clear expectations within our own team. That means that we are on a mission together, that we know that our engineering is our engine, our onboarding and performance is our heart, and our sales is our muscle. And it takes that whole body in order to move forward. Otherwise, we're not, right? Otherwise, we're stuck. And so that happiness then translates to our clients, to our customers, to our partners, because then we are empowering our team to build things that they want, that our partners need, so that we can continue to grow. And that is how, because I've never had the scarcity mindset. There's enough. I want you to win too. That's the way I operate. So when we go out and build things for the dealer body, it's important that we get real feedback, and that, in my opinion, is a partnership.
Well, let's take it down to any relationship in life across the board. It's good, I think, and helpful to think about everything as like interpersonal relationships, because that's how we live life. So when you think of the type of people that you like being around, they're the people that contribute energy into your life, right? And it's impossible to have happiness unless you have some energy, right? And not blind energy, because it's easy to confuse or like enthusiasm with, I think, the concept of energy that I'm talking about, right? Because anyone can be enthusiastic. Salespeople are enthusiastic, right? We probably have some salespeople that are very enthusiastic. When we walk through this giant hall right now, if you have a dealer badge, you're greeted with much enthusiasm, right? But someone who contributes energy into your life, it's someone who makes you stand up a little straighter, who makes you believe that you can do it, who makes you think and understand that, like, oh, you're really listening to me and you understand me, right? And so I love this idea of, if you're on the vendor side, saying like, how can we contribute energy into your organization? Not just the product that you're building, not just this one thing, right? Because if you're thinking in a template mindset, everybody already knows that there is no one size fits all in automotive. It doesn't exist. I can line 100 dealers up, and each one of them has a different combination of technology, a different combination of manufacturer requirements, a different combination of people in their community, and certainly a different combination of people, humans, in their business. No two sales managers are the same. No two GMs are the same, right? There's just no template that's ever going to fit. So the point of empathy coming in and understanding what the combination is, so that you can process that and say, oh, here's how I can encourage you. Here's how I can build a piece of tech for you. Here's how I can rearrange the pieces for you, contributes energy. And when that happens, I've never met someone who didn't want to be around an encouraging person who contributes energy. It just doesn't exist, right? If somebody, like, hey, every time they're around, I just feel a little bit better. Yep. I hope they stay away from me, right? You never ever hear that. And so I've just seen so many great examples of true vendor-dealer partnerships where that is the constant flow back and forth. And so on the vendor side, right, we're trying to sell a product. We're trying to, do some business. But the adoption that I'm seeing on the dealer side is broader than I've ever seen, where dealers, like you said, are understanding we need to innovate, and we're never going to hire it internally. We're never going to hire that level of trajectory and innovation internally. You're a unicorn in the sense that you decided to build it. Yep. So, I mean, that's just my thinking about what you're saying about happiness and energy, right, and interpersonal. But it all comes down kind of like this empathy topic that we're talking about.
So we a couple years ago, we made a decision when we looked at our org chart, and we thought, what do we do in order to stay relevant into the future? And we realized, and we didn't do this wasn't an epiphany we had other people kind of telling us that you should hire somebody like that is in charge of business development from a technology standpoint, right? To understand what technology your company needs in order to continue moving forward, somebody to own those relationships, somebody to look at marketing through that lens. And we put together a job description, we put it out there, and we were very lucky to find a gentleman named Dante who came from a news station. He was a news director, believe it or not. So he was so used to understanding how to create content, work with other vendors, and since we've brought him in, now we have an internal voice, we can speak the language, and we have, quite frankly, expectations, because that's where sometimes I know I lost it in the early days when I didn't have proper expectations in the solutions that I was asking for. I thought they should be now. And then beyond that, I thought that I shouldn't pay anything until I had the solutions live, right? Yeah, of course, these people should work for free for 3 months doing exactly what I asked, and then I will start paying the moment that it's live, which now, being on this side, is just ludicrous. Where else does that happen in the entire world? It doesn't. So one of my friends who I think is walking around the show is named Brian Chapman. He owns Homer Skelton Ford, and he's one of those unicorns. He owns Build-A-Brand. So Brian understands this very well, and ends every call that we have with asking me, and he's a dealer, what can I do for you? Right? It's like, you see me, right? So I just think that's so cool. I think that's so cool. And you know what that makes me want to do? More for him.
Oh, a lot more. A lot more. With that one question, you understand, like, oh, you're not just like, how much can I draw? Back to energy. It's not like, let me plug my charger into you, right? But they're like, how can I contribute energy into you from that? That's an amazing story. Like, but that's why you're talking about it, because it's rare and it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to get to that point. It really just takes a little intentionality. The shirt that I wore today says innovation is a choice, right? Because some people think the word innovation, everyone slings it around, right? It's not a magic ability. It isn't. I believe it's just the decision to pay attention and saying, we're going to try something different to make it a little bit better, right? And in my mind, you're innovating, right? And even the decision to say, what can I do for you? In my mind, that's an innovation in a dealer-vendor relationship, because now you've just changed the pieces. You've rearranged the dynamic to say, let's see how this works. And I mean, you're witness to saying, like, it works really, really, really well. Can you talk a little bit about what your life is? I'm genuinely curious. Sure. What does your day-to-day look like? Because you're working on both sides, on the dealer side, the vendor side. Like, you have an immense empathy for dealers because you are one every day. Yep. And so just what's your day-to-day look like? I'm curious.
Yeah. So I want to start with this, actually. I didn't tie this together in my head back in the day, but I really appreciate diversity. And DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, if you don't know the difference, there's some really good illustrations of the difference between diversity and equity specifically and what it means to be inclusive. And I had the chance early on to serve on a board. I'm gay, so I turned out to be the president of the Mid-America Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, and we built that sucker up to over 500 member businesses strong in Kansas City, including Cerner and Sprint and many others. And it taught me so much. Number one, how to motivate volunteers relative to motivating people you can't fire, people that don't, their ROI is very different than somebody that is on payroll. And I learned what it means to have diverse people at your table, right? Because if you have the same people, most often they're going to have similar ideas and they're going to have a similar path forward, and it may feel like happiness for a little bit, but you're going to come up to an innovative wall very quickly, right? So the idea of diversity for me was really the foundation of how I think about solving the problems that exist today, because the solutions are unique and they are diverse, and we're dealing with diverse people. And so eventually, I think that instinct is the culmination of all of your experiences in one moment. So I truly, you know what I mean? Because and it's true. And so you have to continue having these experiences, and then you'll continue having moments of developing your instinct. And I got to do that. So at some point, when I was going to the dealership every morning, 8 a.m., I'm there with my team. We're talking about things, and cultures are different because they're very commission-oriented to sell cars, and it's a very transactional business, right? So I wanted to make sure that we were doing things at that dealership that were solving the problems there. But then I quickly realized that there's a opportunity for them to also learn how to stomach innovation, right? Because often, you're right, they were the consumer.
Well, what you said developing your instinct. You said developing your instinct. What's the typical instinct to change for people who aren't used to it, right? Yeah. Run, stop, danger, right?
You're exactly right. So I started giving our team the opportunity to speak to some of the innovations that we were doing. And in the way in my mind that I think this is just the way I cope with it, is I think I'm solving the same problem, truly. Whether I'm at the dealership or I'm working at the software company, we're truly solving the same issue. And where I feel so blessed and so lucky is that we get to work together, literally. So the team comes out to the dealership, gets to see the product in action live. Our team has learned how to stomach the innovation because things don't always work. Things don't always come out. Developers don't always see the way that the consumer wants to actually interface with it. And sometimes folks creating content and making things beautiful don't always see how it connects, right? But understanding that, just like in building a house, your electrician's not going to do your plumbing, but they do get to work together, not have to, right? That's the thing that remain curious and then help each other. And then eventually you kind of get to this point where they crave it and they want to be innovative because they feel a part of something bigger. And I think that's worth more than your typical currency, being a part of something bigger.
It's true. I have a thought to that, but I still want to hear about your day-to-day.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I go to work at 8. I'm there till noon. I get to work with my team, and then I hop in the car and I drive about 15 minutes downtown on 9th and Broadway. And we have a great building, and on the first floor is our developers, and then on the second floor is our sales and onboarding and performance. And I get to be there with them until about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and then I go home to my 2 beautiful kids and my husband, who are at the Hoover Dam at this very moment. Think about us National Lampoons. Yeah, I'm sure there's jokes being dropped. Absolutely. And then I go home, and then of course I think about it because I'm I wouldn't say for the first time in my life, but for the first time consistently in my life, I'm really drawn. Right, I think vision pulls, pain pushes, and so think about, are you being pushed by pain or pulled by vision? We are being pulled by vision, and it's thanks to partners that say, I have an idea, I want to solve this problem, I want to be able to do something, and then have the stomach to know that it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it could happen quickly.
So I love that you get to, it's almost like, I'm sure it's not a clean line, but your day is split in half. So you spend your morning with like the closest touch point in automotive, right? With consumers, with salespeople, with service advisors. And then you get to go and say, how can we solve some of those problems? That's really unique. It's truly unique. And I find that fascinating and really engaging because I like to keep moving too, right? It's almost like my closing thought is how do you increase empathy in order to understand what kind of energy to bring to the other person? Empathy is basically, when something becomes a buzzword, and empathy has become a buzzword, it begins to lose its potency. But the principle of empathy will never lose its potency because it's a human characteristic and it's a relationship characteristic. And I always define it as understanding what's important to the other person, right? And in order to do that, you have to understand why they might feel the way they might feel, right? You can never understand exactly how someone feels, right? Because they have different experiences and instincts. But you can try to think like, I wonder how you're receiving this. My first company, we had a lot of reconditioning technicians. They didn't get to spend much time together because there's 50 of them spread out across the Northeast. And no matter who was being hired into the auto industry, we often hired people that were never in the auto industry. We would hire people from food service and from the construction trades because we knew they had the work ethic to do it. And they would come in, and in the best scenarios, I'd be able to sit in a conference room and spend an hour with them. And I would start on one side of the whiteboard, and I would say, this is the year 1900. And let me explain to you the automotive industry and where it came from. And I would talk about manufacturing, that they needed to sell the cars, that's where the franchise dealership model came, right? And then from there came franchise laws, and then I would just go down the line. Now our dealers have an OEM who makes the cars, and the dealership sells the cars, but they are their own business, and that dealership needs to deal with inventory and regulation and marketing. And I would draw the whole diagram, and I would say, and the cars. And when someone trades in a car, the dealer wants to sell that car because when they sell it, they don't only sell it for a markup in the car, but they also make money on the financing. And everybody's like, really? Yes, they do. And they also, when they sell the warranty, actually they get benefit from that. Really? And I would draw like a little line, and I would say, this is where the car gets reconditioned to sell. And in that process, this smaller circle is where the wheel repair happens. This little tiny thing right here is what you're going to do. And now let's back up for a second. So and I'm talking to someone who was hired to literally scuff and clean wheels so someone else could come in and paint them. Now, when you're in that store, you have a little understanding on what the sales manager does, what the service manager does, why it's important that you get this done quickly, right? What that means to them. And it was an effort to say, you need to understand, because if not, and so people walk out and they're like, oh, I'll never look at a dealership again. Now, in the tech space, there are a whole lot of things technologically that go on behind the curtain that the average dealer doesn't even want to know, right? But like, just like your dad's like, just build a website. Just build a website. Can you just make it do this? My brother-in-law is a contractor, and his favorite line, he's like, you just said just, right? Can you just move this? Can you just make the ceiling like an inch higher, right? Right? And because if you don't understand how a house is constructed, it's only an inch, right? And so the level of empathy, I think, starts in just a level of understanding. And it starts with asking the question, I wonder what's important to them. And so I want to encourage any dealer or any vendor that is paying attention to just ask that little question. And that could be your innovation for the day. Think of the challenging situation you have right now and just stop for a minute and say, like, what's important to them in this situation? And maybe ask a question. Even you can ask that question. What's the most important thing to you right here? And I think that that question is really the little wedge that jams the empathy door open just enough that maybe some dialogue can happen and maybe some empathy can grow. And then I think the speed of innovation picks up at that point. So that's my closing thought.
You taught me a lot right there. So because the only way I've known ever to process that is just to remain curious about it. And I've certainly never met anybody who's got it figured out. I don't even know what that means to have it figured out. And I think the more we ascend and the more we grow as a person, the more you uncover, you're like, shoot, I got more to figure out. Yeah, right. And so I just remember that I'm not alone in that feeling. And I know that there are so many brilliant minds in this space that have all come together, excited, putting their best foot forward, enthusiastic, but then also ready. Ready to be seen, ready to feel needed, and ready to solve problems. And I think that's super cool. So thank you so much for coming here. This was very cool. This was very cool. So where do people find you? How do people find you?
The one encouragement I'm going to give everybody is to go to ASOTU.com. It's back here on the screen. It's ASOTU, standing for Automotive State of the Union. Really what we're doing there, we have a daily email that its one goal is to expand empathy in the industry. We want to give you an understanding of what's going on in automotive, in culture, even in crypto. We have a section for like what your kids are into. So I ask my teenagers, like, what's everybody paying attention to right now? And literally, that's like a direct feed from my teenager. I'm like, really? Okay. It's going in the email. So it's really an exercise in scaling empathy in the automotive industry. So ASOTU.com, ASOTU.com. Sign up for the email list, and we'll have a lot of fun together.
Awesome. Thank you. That was awesome.